2023, and I call the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health meeting to order. I'd like to welcome Committee Vice Chair Kia Aina, Council Members Se Dos Santos Tam Tupola, and Councilmember Toba to the Chamber. Councilmember Okimoto is excused from today's meeting. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-3.7, this is a meeting that will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raised hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, which I don't believe we have any today, under HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you, and you cannot reconvene, and we cannot reconvene until we reestablish that contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand that you'll be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Just wanted to note, members, that agenda item number 2, Bill 49, 2023, posted on today's agenda for discussion has, number 5, I'm sorry. No worries. That would be agenda item previously number 5 has been canceled and will not be discussed today. Moving on to agenda item number 1 for action, resolution 23-215, appointing Frederick Rappoon to serve on the Clean Water and Natural Funds Advisory Commission of the City and County of Honolulu. Members, for your information, we received a revised nomination form to the agenda item. Council Communication 258 supersedes the related council communication posted on the agenda. Do we have Mr. Rappoon present? If you don't mind coming up to the podium. And members, I'll just preliminarily ask, are there any questions for the nominee? Yeah. Aloha, mahalo for being here. If you could just state your name and then maybe share a little bit about yourself and what you hope to fulfill by serving on the commission.
Okay, aloha. Thank you for having me down here. My name is Frederick Rappoon, and I currently work for the University of Hawaii for the He'eia National Estuarine Research Reserve. So it's a federal state community partnership on the windward side to restore ahupua'a systems in He'eia. And so my job for that is education and outreach. And so I work with a lot of teachers and students, and I see the huge demand that there is for access to these natural lands and biocultural landscapes. So my motivation to serve on this committee is, to help increase access from an educational standpoint, and to, just be of benefit to the teachers and students that I work with.
Appreciate that. Any questions?
Comments?
Discussion? Or?
Comments, is it okay, Chair?
Please proceed, Vice Chair.
First of all, mahalo, Frederick. It's so nice to see a lot of our, our young professionals enter this field, because we need as much help as we can get. So I appreciate your willingness to serve on this commission. Your resume speaks to your commitment to educate the community, stakeholders, researchers, and fellow educators about Aina-based education and watershed and estuarine systems. And while not critical to the work you would do on the commission, I note your knowledge of and work of work to control invasive species, especially the little fire ants. And it's direly needed in Hawaii now more than ever. So mahalo nui. And all that to say, your academic studies and professional experience in the areas of environmental science and public policy will undoubtedly serve the people of Honolulu County and the Commission very well. So I'm just glad to see you coming on board.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. Sensing Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your willingness to serve. This is a really important commission. I'm glad that we created it a few years ago. And part of the purpose of the fund is to purchase or acquire, certain properties. And I think there's 7 different categories under which a property could be acquired and sort of the purposes. Out of those 7, do you kind of have, what's your philosophy towards those? Are you more concerned about the sort of historic and culturally important lands or open space or, possible areas for agriculture? Like, obviously we can't buy every single property. So I want to make sure that I understand where the commissioners are coming from when we do go and decide on one property to purchase.
Yeah, all of those things are interconnected. So hopefully there will be proposals that come in that hit more than one area. But my background is definitely more in environmental science and somewhat in agricultural science. So I think those are the kinds of proposals where I can lend a little bit more expertise. But that's not to say that I would necessarily prioritize those. I guess I would look for feedback from the communities where they're going to be taking place and make sure that it's in line with what that community wants. Even though the fund does serve the broader Oahu community. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from members? Councilmember Say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Boone, thank you very much for considering the position. Reflecting back, I think I know your father and your uncle, who are great taro farmers, kalo farmers, and that's the Waihole Waikani area. If appointed to the commission, one of the concerns that I've had the past 3 years is the fact that when these nonprofits do get these resources, the monies, how do we manage them? Meaning that they'll, fulfill their obligation. Because once we give them the money and they acquire the easement or the property, who is going to be monitoring them? I'm saying is, as a property manager, that they fulfill their obligations of what they had, used the money for. And I bring this up because during this past 3 years I've been on this council, we've had about 6 or 7 nonprofits who have gotten these funds, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But I just want future council members to know what we have acquired as an inventory and listing. And maybe you can invite us, once you're appointed, to take us to some of these sites that we have, put the monies into. So just your thoughts about management. That's the other part of the equation, yeah?
Is that on? Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Transparency, is the way to go, I think. And like you said, site visits, and just making sure that the public knows that this is where the money went. And then, of course, if they're nonprofits, they have boards. So understanding, what other funding and obligation they're under. But I think just transparency overall, and the more we can kind of raise the profile of the committee and the work that it does, I think the kind of public opinion will help to monitor.
I just wanted to share this with you that I know you will be the ambassador of the program, and the key for me is that if it is possible that we could do some public service announcements of the success of all of the city and county's acquisitions or easements that we've granted to these nonprofits to reflect how successful the program is, and that's all it is. If we can show that we are successful, the general public would be much more appreciative of the program that you'll be probably, confirmed for. That's all I got to say, Chair.
Mahalo, council member. Yeah. Since seeing no other questions, Ms. Rapun, if you want to have a seat for a couple minutes, we'll go to testimony. Mahalo for your time. Turning to in-person registered testifiers, seeing none, is anyone in the gallery wanting to testify today? Since if there's none, we'll go to remote testimony. And I believe we have a phone number ending in 097. If you're able to unmute by pressing *6 and then proceed with your testimony.
Are we currently discussing the flavored tobacco portion, or am I in the wrong section?
Wrong section. We'll note you down. This is caller 097. We'll note you down for the tobacco legislation, and we'll call you at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mahalo. I see Angela's hand raised. Angela, do you want to proceed if you're testifying on Mr. Rapoon's nomination and appointment?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES in strong support. The values he's shared with us is going to be something valuable to protecting the natural resources, the marine life, and the biodiversity of our planet. And protecting animals and the birds. So there is one of the purposes for the Clean Water Natural Lands Fund is public outdoor recreation education, including access to beaches and mountains. I think it'd also be nice to work with a student like Noah from the last hearing from Parks and Recs to bring to life some of those ideas for the students in the schools.
Mahalo, Angela. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any other testifiers online?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. We'll close testimony. And the members, before I make my recommendation, was there any additional discussion? Since seeing none, I just wanted to, again, echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and mahalo you, Mr. Rapun, for being willing. And I think, given all the work you're doing in the community and just still being willing to step up and serve more, it's really appreciated. And so I look forward to all the work that you can do. So I'm gonna recommend that Resolution 23-215 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Mahalo. And so we'll move on to item number 2. For action, this is Resolution 23-217, authorizing the issuance and delivery of a multifamily housing revenue note and a principal amount not to exceed $30 million for the purpose of making a mortgage loan to provide financing to JHW Kuhaulua Partners LP, a Hawaii limited partnership for multifamily rental housing development, determines and prescribes certain other matters relating thereto, and approves and authorizes related actions and the execution and delivery of related documents and agreements. Members, we also have listed on the agenda addendum a proposed CD1, OCS 2023-0827 version of the resolution. For your information, a summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda addendum. And for your information, we received the departmental communication from DPP. Available online is departmental communication 659. I believe we have Mr. Harai here for the administration. If you had any comment, you could come up at this time. And as he's coming up, I'll just ask if members have any questions for Mr. Harai. Okay. Feel free to turn on the mic and, if you wanted to provide any comment on the resolution.
Yes, I thought I'd try to make a short presentation.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Do we have that for distribution or?
We should be on.
Perfect. Okay. So it should be numbered after the hearing and available for public review, but it's viewable on the screen as well, if you want to go ahead and proceed.
Yeah, this is the, this is actually the for-action approving the low-income housing tax credits for Jack Hall Waipahu by the Board of Directors of the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly and just point out a few points. The developers, the Ahi Group, Makani Maeva is here today representing them. It's in Waipahu, above the Filipino Cultural Center between there. And then these are just some pictures of the project. What I wanted to get to was this page, which shows that the project is on city and county land. The affordability period is 45 years. It's got 144 units, 141 manager unit, and 143 units that are available to renters at 60% of the area median income. I don't know if you can see it, but on the proposed financing structure, which is the middle block there, the senior debt bonds, Bank of Hawaii, that they're referring to at $29,912,180. That's the $30 million that we're talking about today. It says the little footnote there, asterisk, says the applicant anticipates receipt of $29,912,180 interim in private activity bonds issued by the city and county of Honolulu. Upon conversion of proceeds from LIHTC equity contributions, the interim tranche will be paid down to $23 million. On the next page, that red spot shows that the red spot shows that it was this for action was approved by the HHFDC Board of Directors on March 9th, 2023, which approved the 4% low-income housing tax credits for the project. Let's see. And this page is the declaration of official intent to reimburse project expenditures with proceeds of tax-exempt bonds. And it shows $33 million, and it comes from the 2020 and 2022 city private activity bond allocation, which we get from the IRS through the state. And as you may recall, the Mauna Kea Towers project, this administration inherited $120 million of 2020 private activity bond cap, which expires at the end of this year. $105 million of which you approved for the Mauna Kea Towers project, which closed on May 31st. So this is approximately this project uses the $16 million balance of the 2020 PAB bond allocation and $14 million of the 2022 city bond allocation. That's the $30 million. Also, I guess, and so also today we have our bond counsel, Kathleen Orlandi from Hawkins Delafield, who I've asked to say a few words.
Thank you. It's good to be back here again. I met with you for Mauna Kea Tower, and it's a pleasure to be here. In many respects, this is very similar to Mauna Kea Tower. Low and moderate income housing. 100% of the units will be set aside for tenants whose income may not exceed 60% of median income. Rents are also limited. The rents may not exceed 30% of the person's income. So all of these nice improvements that will happen, sometimes folks worry about, oh great, that's just going to raise our rent, but that's not going to be permitted. So on the global scale, this is very similar to Mauna Kea Tower. On a more granular legal document scale, it's completely different. We're giving you a full education in public finance. Mauna Kea Tower was publicly offered. We had official statement, very similar to your wastewater transaction last month, or very similar to your geo transactions. Jack Hall Waipahu is a private placement. The developer team determined that they would get a better execution, better interest rates, get the financing they needed if they went to a local bank. And Bank of Hawaii stepped up and said, we'll be the bondholder. You don't have to go off and sell these bonds in $5,000 increments. We're going to buy all $30 million. In some instances, the banks partner with another bank. They might bank with First Hawaiian or do some kind of an agreement. But Bank of Hawaii is the primary bondholder here. And so there's a little bit of difference in the sense that you don't have the national underwriting team, you don't have the public offering document, you don't have the SEC overlooking the shoulders because we do it a public offering. What you do have is the strength and breadth of Bank of Hawaii. All of their team is doing the underwriting. They're analyzing the debt. They're doing stress tests. They're determining that this is going to be a safe, solid investment that they want their name associated with. So the names of the documents look a little bit different. We have like a pledge and assignment, an agency agreement. Bank of Hawaii is going to be your agent. They're going to take in the rent money from the borrower. They're going to pay out the bondholder, which currently happens to be Bank of Hawaii. But they are your agent. And so we have a Bank of Hawaii is your partner in this transaction, and you want to be comfortable with them. Aside from that, though, I'll be happy to answer any questions about this. It really functions very similar to Mauna Kea Tower.
Mahalo for that. Appreciate that. Also wanted to recognize the presence of Chair Waters and Floor Leader Cordero. Members, were there any questions for Bond Council Councilmember Say?
It's nice to see you again. I have a question, and this is in regards that it's not going to be tied to bonds, but this morning's presentation by the Chinatown group, where this particular project could have qualified for a historic preservation site. Would anyone know? Would the Jack Hall Apartments be maybe qualified since it's a very old building?
It looks like Ms. Maiva may be able to answer that question if you wanted to turn on the mic and then identify yourself for the record and proceed, if you're willing. Mahalo.
Hi, I'm Makani Maiva, president of the AHE Group. Thank you for the question. The project is old, but it is not architecturally significant and would not qualify for historic credits, no.
Okay. No, just that they had, what, 20% federal tax credits for historic preservation. So I thought maybe if you could apply that to this particular project would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Appreciate the question. Mahalo. Any other questions from testifiers? Since none, we'll move. Councilmember Tupola.
Just for bond counsel, please. Just a quick question about the funding sources used. I'm really interested in it because some of the funding sources work, to make the lowest type of income housing. And so are the two sources just the LIHTC, and is the TEFRA a second source of financing?
TEFRA is an abbreviation for the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982. I had to learn that a long time ago. And all that is, the TEFRA aspect of it is the requirement that the Internal Revenue Service puts on bond issues, that we go and have a public hearing, a notice and public hearing, so the public can comment on both the city entering into debt as well as the ultimate project, and then the approval of the highest government official. In this case, it was the mayor who approved the TEFRA. So your funding sources are going to be a number of them. The bonds are going to fund a large portion. As you indicated, LIHTC, which stands for the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. These are investors around the country who are willing to buy into this project in exchange for getting federal tax credits. And I believe they're giving about $20 million, which is an outright gift, honestly. There's no payback. There's no scenario by which the investor has to be paid back. They just are counting on getting their tax credits, and those tax credits are so lucrative to them that they're willing to give this money. This project also has Section 8, which is a HUD subsidy, which subsidizes the tenant rents. See what other funding source. There's, I believe, home money in this. It's also a city lease, so there wasn't the requirement to raise capital to buy the fee simple on the land. And we call that kind of the capital stack, all of the different funding sources. And often these projects would have HHFDC's revolving fund, the rental housing revolving fund. This does not, Mauna Kea Tower did not. But when you see the capital stack, it's all the different funding sources that are involved.
Yeah,
The two primary ones are the LIHTC and the bonds.
Yeah, I didn't see the HHFDC one in here.
No, they're not on this project.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to know where all of it was coming from. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? We'll go into testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person registered testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Any unregistered folks wanting to testify? Since seeing none, we'll go over to remote testimony. I see Ms. Young's hand up. Is she the only testifier for this item, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Angela, do you want to proceed whenever you're ready? Mahalo.
Aloha, Angela Melody Young, testifying in wishing to comment. So I'm wondering if this is the same multifamily revenue bonds from the Hula May multifamily program. The Hula May multifamily program is a state program from HHFDC. And this information for developers or the public can be linked from the website from HHFDC. So it says the purpose of the Hula May multifamily tax-exempt bond program is to promote the development of new or the rehab of existing rental housing projects through the issuance of tax-exempt revenue bonds for interim and or permanent financing at rates below market interest rates. And the HHFDC serves as the conduit issuer of the bonds, and the issuance of the bonds through the MMF program is subjected to the allocation of private activity volume cap by the State Director of Finance and the approval of the Governor of the State of Hawaii. So because the multifamily revenue bonds, it affects each other, I'm just wondering if it's coming from the same pot as the Hula May multifamily revenue
That's
bonds.
great insight, Angela. Mahalo for your testimony. And with that, I believe testimony is now closed. Members, was there any discussion before I make my recommendation? Seeing none, just wanted to mahalo everyone for really getting the activity bond program up and running, and super exciting project. So Ms. Maiva, thank you for the work you're doing as well. I'm going to recommend that Resolution 23-217 be amended to the posted CD1. Any discussion, reservations, objections to that? Hearing none, Resolution 23-217 is amended to the CD1, and the Chair recommends that Resolution 23-217 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections? Discussion, Councilmember Say?
Just one question for Mr. Hirai.
Of course.
Recognizing that this is a private activity bond, will we get another allotment next year?
We have, actually on this one, we're using a portion of, what did I say, 14 million of the 2022 allocation, which we, well, for various reasons, we couldn't have returned to the HHFDC. We have our 23 allocation still outstanding, which we may want to return to HHFDC. Pursuant to a cooperative agreement. And then next year, presumably, we'll get another one. It's an annual thing.
But at what amount? That's what I'm...
Roughly around 130 million a year.
Okay, so Chair, maybe you can find a lot more housing developers willing to use that fund.
Let's do it. Appreciate that, Councilmember. Mr. Hirai, just to clarify that, so when do we have to decide whether we're going to return those funds or not?
November 15th.
November 15th of this year?
Yeah.
Okay, mahalo. Appreciate that. With that being discussion on the amended version, any other discussion? Any reservations, objections to passing out Resolution 23217 CD1? Hearing none, so ordered. And we'll move on to agenda item number 3, Bill 47, 2023, amending the curbside recycling program to include the collection of manufactured compostable materials. I believe we have Henry Gabriel, perfect, from Department of Environmental Services, the Recycling Program Branch Chief. Aloha, Chief. Do you want to just introduce yourself, and then if you have any comments on the bill right now, go ahead. If not, I'll see if there's any questions.
Testing. Henry Gabriel, Department of Environmental Services, the Recycling Program Branch Chief. ENV is in support of Bill 47. We are looking at working with the council member's office to make sure there's no discrepancy to the already existing restrictions and bans to plastics. Lastly, we will be introducing compostable material to our green waste and food waste RFP. So it would go in line with what we are currently doing right now. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. That's great to hear. Any Councilmember Tupola?
Thank you. I did talk with the director because I think you guys were supposed to RFP like end of August. So I think, are you guys going to issue that? Do you have a time frame?
Yes, we've finalized the RFP within Department of Environmental Services. Right now, it's with the purchasing office for their review. Once they go through their review, our hope is by October.
Okay, so October is more the timeline. And then
Yes.
Is the contract going to start May 2025? Because I believe the current contract goes to what, May 2020?
The current contract ends March 30th, March 30th, 2025. The new contract will start April 2025.
Oh, I see. And I think the director said something like it's going to include enclosed facilities. Is that correct?
It's an in-vessel system, very specific in-vessel system.
And is that because of the compostable materials? Because I think prior we had an outdoor one, but what is the specification of why the enclosed?
It's really because of the food waste.
Oh, the food waste.
The
that's
food
what he
waste,
said.
yes.
Yeah, because
green
of the
waste
emissions.
you can do, yeah.
Yeah.
Odor control, vermin control. That way the contractor can control the environment within that in-vessel.
Yeah, I had people reaching out to me asking when you guys were going to list the RFP, so I'll update them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other
Yes.
questions? Councilmember Say.
I'm sorry, even though I'm not on the committee, I have a question in regards to how much has the business community converted from plastic to compostable?
So in regards to the disposable foodware ordinance, that's what you're talking
correct.
about.
Yes.
I would say a lot of the distributors are selling the
Compostable.
the compliant products.
Yeah,
But what you see in the restaurants right now is polypropylene. That's your number 5 plastic. That's your hinge containers. So there is that out there that you'll see. So it might be a little bit of confusion because we do have this plastic bag or restrictions to plastic food containers, but you also see the plastic number 5 containers as well.
Just that I hope we are moving towards the compliance of the ordinance.
Yes,
Yeah.
I speak with a lot of distributors almost weekly now, and it's decreased from daily. And so they are selling it, but there is that one issue with polypropylene.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? I was curious if, in terms of moving in this direction, in your perspective, is there a need to clarify the ordinance in terms of specifications for types of products that should be used, or is the market just going to do that already? Meaning, like, what's being used is going to be ideally, or what's ideal for composting?
Well, right now, so the state has a law already, and it's really about PFAS. So once these types of packaging are PFAS free, then I feel that the compostables will be more receptive, or the contractors will be more receptive to the product. And so that law goes into effect, I believe, January 1st, 2025. So there's going to be a transition from PFAS containers now to PFAS-free containers. Not only that, we're really looking at trying to capture as much compostables as we can. But once again, you do see the number 5 hinge containers out there. And so from afar, you can't tell if a bioplastic and a plastic, they all look the same. The numbering is different, but they look the same. So to the average homeowner, it's gonna be like, oh, what is this? Unless they look at the bottom. So it's gonna be crucial that Department of ENV does a really huge public education for this bill.
Mahalo, appreciate that. We'll go to testimony if there are no additional questions. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Clerks, do we have any in-person registered testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Anyone in person wanting to testify? Do you want to come up to mic? Seeing none, I'll go to remote testimony. Seeing no registered remote testifiers. Ms. Young, I see your hand up. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else online wanting to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, we'll close after Ms. Young, if you want to proceed.
Aloha, Chair. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES, wishing to comment. So the city regulated plastics, and that was with the Disposable Foodware Ordinance, Bill 40, and it was signed into law on December 15, 2019. That's Ordinance 19-30. And the intent was to protect human safety and welfare and to improve environmental quality in the county and in the neighboring marine, ocean life, and globally. So I think it's really good that the city regulated plastics, and then everyone had to convert from that toxic material that was causing environmental damage, and now raising awareness about compostable material, right? Like manufactured compostable material, which I think are the brown plates, like the earth-friendly plates, and to regulate recycling because of environmental impact is something that public policy really should be about.
Appreciate that, Angela. Mahalo for your advocacy on this issue as well. Thank you. And then we'll close public testimony. With that, members, I was going to recommend that the bill move forward. Is there any discussion before I make my recommendation? Do want to invite, input from environmental services. The purpose is fairly broad, so we can make adjustments to other parts of the bill if needed. The chair is going to recommend that Bill 47, 2023 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion, objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Mahalo, Branch Chief Gabriel, for coming down as well. And we'll move to agenda item number 4, Bill 46, 2023, CD1, defining and prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products within the city and county of Honolulu. Members, we have posted to the agenda proposed CD2 OCS 2023-0824/9/7/2023 at 1:13 p.m. to the bill submitted by Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. For your information, summary of the amendment is listed on the agenda. Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, did you want to provide any clarification?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I introduced a proposed committee draft 2, which removes references to cigars and little cigars, but adds definitions for hookah, loose leaf tobacco, premium cigar, and shisha tobacco product. It also makes a few other non-substantive changes and also provides a new subsection D called exceptions that exempts premium cigars, loose leaf tobacco, and shisha tobacco products from the prohibition. I will note for the record that I'm introducing this CD2 so that we can have a discussion about these because these things did come up over the course of our previous hearings. I'm not particularly wedded to any particular outcome with regard to this, but I think it's important that we have this discussion. This is an issue that continues to vex the state legislature, which is, I guess, why it's here. But I think it's important that we have a full, robust discussion before moving forward with a really robust bill.
Appreciate those comments. We also have Director Ireland, or Dr. Ireland from the administration. Were there any questions for the administration on the bill? Dr. Ireland, if I could just have you maybe come up and just comment again on the administration's position. And feel free to comment anything additional, but just wanted to double check.
Sure, thank you, Chair and council members. We stood in support of the bill as initially listed. I understand there's now a CD2, and we haven't had the opportunity to fully vet out the changes there, and right now don't have a position on that. And as far as my understanding is none of this would go into effect unless there's substantial changes to the state law. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Not necessarily substantial. They just have to give us back the power, but
yes,
that's a good point.
Right. So, but we do stand in support of the original ordinance bill, but do look forward to more discussion on some of the proposed changes.
I appreciate that. Councilmember Tupola.
Thanks so much, Chair. Real quick question. When you guys said that to give us the power back to do that, do we not have the power to be able to do this? Or do we have enforcement power to do this?
I'm not a legal scholar, but we have some here with legal training, and maybe they would be better to explain the nuances of how the state has written their law. Would that be acceptable, Chair?
I can ask that question to our lawyers, but do we have the wherewith to enforce this?
I don't think any of this will go into effect unless the state changes its the county the ability to even make and enforce these ordinances.
Okay.
Without changes in the state law.
Thank you. That is my concern too, is whether or not we can make an effect with the current proposed version. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those questions. Any other comments, questions for Director? Or since seeing none, thank you, Dr. Ireland. If you want to just hang around for a little bit. We'll go over to in-person testimony. We'll start with Elizabeth Ryan Gill, and then Peggy Merzra, do you want to line up behind? And then if there's anyone else in person, they can proceed after that. Ms. Gill.
Aloha, Chair and members of the council. Liza Ryan Gill, representing Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids here in Hawaii. We have been working on this piece of legislation now for over 8 years, and unfortunately, the city and county and all counties in Hawaii used to have the ability to make tobacco control legislation and policy at the county level until about 5 years ago. So no, we are advocating for a policy that could not go into effect unless the state legislature repealed preemption. We are hoping that if this passes, that they will feel that they have waited long enough to take action, and maybe they should just give it back to the counties, since the counties were doing such a good job at it before then, before 2018. City and County of Honolulu has a long history going back to 1997 of actually passing policies like smoke-free beaches and bus stops and restaurants before the state has taken action. So we think this is an appropriate place for this policy. One of our main, so that's your answer to your question.
Could I ask a follow-up, Chair?
Of course, of Ms. Gill.
So thank you very much for that. I guess, the thought is, obviously, I don't smoke and I'm not in favor of tobacco, or especially the youth. And I think the preamble of the bill talks a lot about advertisements targeting kids, and it always happens that way, right? Not only with addictive substances, but everything we don't want kids to see, advertisements targeting them. So my thought was, because we don't have the authority to do this, and obviously we need the state to do a lot of other things for us that we don't need to have an adversarial relationship, but rather a, one that benefits both of us, is we do have control over buses and the rail. And I know that we don't do a ton of advertising, but I was going to suggest as something that we as in county actually have authority over is those things, the things that go on the bus and the rail, meaning that it could have anti-vape advertising. The only other thing that we're over that I think would make a big difference is Summer Fun. You know, so we do have a direct influence on the kids that come to Summer Fun, whether or not we are able to include something on the pamphlets, you know, as the kids sign up for Summer Fun, or whether or not we could just, you know, encourage kids not to make those decisions. I think for me, those are the two areas where our purview could make a difference. Because if we're playing this marketing war, well, we do have a lot of city facilities that, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of people use, whether it's the bus line or the rail. And we also do have a small little influence on the kids that come to Summer Fun. And just wanted to know if you would be in favor of something like that.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Kevin Ramirez, who is an educator with Hi-Fi, who speaks in a lot of schools, would be happy to come to Summer Fun and talk about how Big Tobacco has targeted especially Filipino and Native Hawaiian families and youth, and so we'd love to see that.
Yeah, those are just thoughts. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gill, I did want to ask if you had any insight on just the enforcement conversations, either today or at prior committees, you know, if the question is whether, you know, anyone would really be positioned to enforce the law. Would it be overly problematic, too big of a task to take on, or?
I mean, I think it would be in some ways easier than it is now. Right now, we have lots of products that are essentially from the black market that are being sold in stores because it is very difficult to identify which ones are allowed by the FDA and which ones are not. And we have heard multiple credible reports of also manufacturers sending fake letters to retailers saying that their product is allowable by the FDA. So I think in response to even some of those questions on like, would a policy like this make the black market proliferate? Actually, right now it is proliferating. And so a policy like this would make it much more clear to say, actually, none of these products are allowed to be sold. You know, adults can still get their, you know, FDA-approved cessation devices. They can still get tobacco-flavored e-cigarettes and things that they might want to use. But, and then as far as the enforcement part goes, this will be complaint-driven, right? So if you walk into a vape shop and you see a product and you go, hey, this says that it tastes like Luau Punch, I'm gonna call somebody, I'm gonna call the police and report them, and then it would be complaint-driven. Eventually, then retailers would realize that it's not worth it to sell these products. It's costing them more money than it's making them. And then they would stop. So I think it's pretty light from the enforcement side. And I think if anything, it just makes it very, very clear that what products are allowed to be sold and not allowed. Because right now it's clear as mud. So thank you.
Appreciate that. So just to clarify, sounds like you're telling me, I won't call any out by name, but if I walk into my local gas station or convenience store, sizable number of those vapes are probably illegal already. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, they're not authorized to be sold.
And so right now, we're requiring HPD to know which vape is illegal and which isn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a priority for them at this point in time, but if you were to look at the, and it's, you know, several hundred pages, right? Because there's lots of different products coming out day of the FDA approved, or of the ones that are allowed to be sold and ones that are going through a pre-market like approval and everything. That is very, very complicated. And many retailers also don't find that they have that time. So they put themselves at jeopardy by selling products that they're not supposed to be selling.
I appreciate that. I mean, if our retailers don't have the time, our law enforcement certainly don't, to go through thousands of pages to figure out, you know, which vape they need to go.
So this would just make it much more clear for them.
Appreciate that. Any other questions for the testifier? Sensing none, we'll bring up Ms. Mirza next. And then I don't see anyone else approaching, so we'll go to a remote after.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Peggy Mirzwa with the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Obviously, we strongly support the CD1, but we understand that we need to have some discussions. So as far as the proposed language of the CD2, we do feel that exemptions lead to loopholes which enable tobacco companies to exploit those exemptions and work around the law, much like Liza was talking about. And that that's where the tobacco companies get their claws back in. And to be completely transparent, we fully support any cultural practices. Traditionally, hookah has only been flavored by honey, molasses, sugar, fruit, or nothing, and it was smoked in specific settings by adults. Unfortunately, hookahs are used advantageously for profit and exploitation of young people. We did a quick search on the internet and found some cup holder hookahs that were about $15. And that item is clearly not tied to a cultural practice, much like the flavors of Pog or Chill Cherry. Additionally, the exemption around shisha should be explicitly tied to the use of hookah if it is used for traditional means. And because without that clarity, there are some unintended consequences with the flavored tobacco still being sold in a variety of retailers where it shouldn't be. And one other thing that we wanted to bring up, that premium cigars, we would prefer the cost, the wholesale price be $12. Anyway, those are our comments on the proposed amendments. And of course, again, I'm just going to reiterate, we like CD1, but thank you so much for your time and also for the discussion. We want to see robust legislation move forward.
Appreciate that. And please stay for the discussion if you can, in case we need to call on you. Any questions for the testifier at this time? Sensing none, mahalo. We'll go over to remote testimony just in the lineup. First three, Mitzi Higa, Rima Kori, and then Luke Itomura. Mitzi, if you want to proceed when you're ready.
Hi, aloha, Chair Wire and committee members. Speaking for the Hawaii State Teachers Association for Bill 46, we too are in support of the CD1, and we do not support any exemptions or exceptions in the proposed draft for much of the same reasons that were already stated. If you look in the written testimony of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, she actually has some great pictures of why. Just go ahead and look at that at your leisure. We want to share that we are, as teachers, taking away these devices, turning into administrators, and they are getting bags of trash of these vapes every semester. Children are being educated, but that's not working. What we need to do, this is a continual problem. It's only escalating. We need to ban these flavors because it's preying on our youth, and that is what our teachers want us to do. We need to ban them. So thank you for listening.
Mahalo for your testimony. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Higa. Going to Rima Kori, if you want to unmute and proceed when you're ready.
Oh, perfect. Good afternoon, City Council. Thank you for your time. My name is Rima Kori. I'm one of the founding members of the National Hookah Community Association, which was established to protect and preserve the rich cultural tradition of hookah, which has been around for nearly 1,000 years. I just want to clarify, someone had mentioned like a cup holder hookah, and I really do want to kind of educate the lawmakers on what hookah is. You know, hookah requires hot coals to be placed on the top. These coals usually take about 20 to 30 minutes to set up, and it's not very easy to hold a cup and have hot hookahs. You know, they will fall off and burn you. So it's very dangerous to actually consider something like that. I've never seen something like that unless it was electronic, and that's not what we're about. We have nothing to do with anything electronic. Traditional hookahs are usually 3 feet tall and very difficult to conceal. So we appreciate your consideration, and we don't want to have any unintended consequences of eliminating this rich cultural tradition. Thank you.
Mahalo for that testimony.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Looks like Vice Chair Kiaina.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I have found the testimonies explaining the cultural, economic, and social value of cigars and shisha products to be compelling, and generally agree that the flavor descriptions of the traditional versions of these products are substantially different from flavors that target youth like bubblegum, cotton candy, etc. So I generally support the proposed CD2 by Councilmember Dos Santos Tam to exempt handmade cigars and shisha that excludes electronic devices such as electronic hookah, electronic cigarette, or electronic tobacco products. My question to you is, do you have other suggested language to narrowly allow use of an electronic heating source in place of charcoal that does not open the door to electronic hookahs and electronic cigarettes? And the reason I'm asking this is because a quick online search shows that electronic hookahs range widely and include products that are very similar to vaping products that this measure is targeting. So even with the electronic exclusion in the California definition, which the proposed CD is modeled after, manufacturers have already started creating products not intended to be covered. Do you have any on that?
Yes, absolutely. So just to clarify, there's only 2 states that have passed a flavored tobacco ban, and both exempt hookah, and some of the suggested language that is included, for example, in California, says that a traditional non-electric hookah is exempt. And so that's exactly kind of what I think direction-wise, it makes it very clear and eliminates bad actors who might want to exploit that as, some type of way to get around legislation and law, to just make it clear that it's non-electric traditional hookah. Oh, I can't hear you for some reason.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for this testifier? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Corey, for your testimony. Going now to Luke Itomura, and then Christopher Hudgens will be after that. Mr. Itomura, please proceed.
Dear Chair Waters and City Council members, my name is Luke Itomura. I'm a current freshman at Punahou School, and I am testifying to express my strong support for Bill 46. I stand along with countless Hawaii youth who despise the youth-flavored vaping epidemic. We collectively believe that passing this legislation is an essential step in protecting the health and future of the youth. At just 13 years old, I was offered a flavored vape by another youth for the first time. This youth smoker used many tactics to peer pressure me into trying it. Their main tactic was telling me that it was a delicious Hawaiian Sun flavor. At that moment, I realized how easy it is to fall for the appeal of flavored vapes. In fact, 85% of young smokers in the world use flavored tobacco products. My friends in the 6th grade had also mentioned that they were offered flavored vapes. For people as young as 12, flavors like Pog or Hawaiian Sun are an enticing death trap. What starts as an innocent curiosity can turn into a lifelong addiction filled with lung cancer, mental illness, heart disease, and stroke. There is no other product on the market that kills 50% of its users. Bill 46 will act as a barrier preventing youth from being used by companies like Big Tobacco, who specifically target youth with their marketing in social media, magazines, and stores. Big Tobacco directly stated, younger adult smokers are the only source of replacement smokers. If younger adults turn away from smoking, the industry must decline. Why play with the health of the youth just so the tobacco industry can thrive? Moreover, a study conducted by Stanford University revealed that prohibiting flavored tobacco products has many advantages, including savings in healthcare expenses, a reduction in our carbon footprint, increased labor productivity, and reduced consumption of physical resources. 76% of Hawaii registered voters support this cause, justifying that it is a highly wanted policy. I passionately request the City Council members to support Bill 46, be agents of positive change, and to stand on the side of health, compassion, and a brighter future for our youth. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions from the council members? Seeing none, thank you, Luke. We'll go next to Christopher Hudgens, and then Jill Tamashiro, and then Angela Young. Christopher, do you want to proceed if you're online?
Sure, right here. Thank you. Chris Hudgens. I also serve on the board of the National Hookah Community Association. We want to thank you for considering an exemption for hookah. You'd be joining California and numerous other cities who have done so, recognizing the cultural significance of it and the lack of youth use of the product. I did want to talk about the electronic question. We are not to big tobacco. We only represent hookah. We're only looking for an exemption for hookah. So we're happy to work with the council on any language that can clarify that hookah is the only object we're talking about. We're not looking to protect e-hookah, which is something that many people who are making vapes try to claim an e-hookah is some sort of hookah product. It's not. It's a vape. It relies on e-liquid. And that's really the distinction. So we just want to clarify that, and we want to work with you. There are some electronic applications in traditional hookahs only relating to the heat source, not the subject or substance that is smoked, which would be e-liquid. So we're happy to clarify. The benefit to having that electronic ignition is you no longer have to use the coals that have been used for hundreds of years with hookah that can contribute some emissions when you're smoking. So it really is some health benefit. But again, we don't want any loopholes here, and we're happy to work with you to make sure that doesn't happen.
Mahalo for your testimony. Any questions for the testifier? Thank you, Mr. Hudgens. Moving on to Jill Tamashiro.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Jill Tamashiro on behalf of the Hawaii State Department of Health. We respectfully oppose the exemptions in CD2, and we continue to support the language in CD1. The reasons for opposing are health related. We know that sometimes these products that are exempted are perceived by the public as less harmful. However, the science does not support that. In general, the department strives for regulatory parity with all tobacco products. So we discourage treating some tobacco products differently than others. I think historically, there's also been, we've seen product migration result from exempting certain products over others. So I'm going back to my earlier point about the science not supporting exempting these products. We know that hookah itself is sometimes perceived as less harmful, but in a single 1 hour session of smoking, the person may inhale 100 to 200 times the amount of smoke they would from a single cigarette, just given the longer duration of the session. There can be exposure up to 9 times of carbon monoxide, or almost 2 times the amount of nicotine. And these products in general that are being proposed to be exempted have been associated with cancers of the lung, bladder, mouth, throat, or pancreas as well. So these products are not safer, and there's no reason to exempt them. And but at the same time, the department does support the language of CD1. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Mahalo, Ms. Tamashiro, for your testimony and insight from the Department of Health. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you. We'll now move to Ms. Young, and then I'll just note that caller 097 will be next after Ms. Melody Young. Angela.
Chair, testifying in strong support. So I just want to really echo the moms and the teachers in this discussion about health to persuade the legislators, please regulate e-cigarettes through public policy. Smoking these devices can cause serious physical, mental health consequences, including risks of anxiety and depression, which is affecting the students. Newport Institute says smoking can cause anxiety. And another federal initiative created by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to help people to stop smoking, smokefreeteen.gov says, anxiety is feeling worried, nervous, or panicky. Anxiety can be caused by stress, or it can be triggered by things in life. It's a normal part of life, and too much stress can cause people to feel overwhelmed from exhaustion. Ironically, smoking is meant to calm people down, and the effect of nicotine is to calm people down, but some people have really bad reactions, and everyone is different. You never know how the chemical substance of the nicotine is going to affect you. And so you never know if you're going to be the one who, your parents and your teachers warn you about. You want to be cool, you want to smoke with your friends, and then you get addicted, and then you get cancer, you start getting anxiety, you spend all your money on vapes. So the proposal of this policy, is to ask the representatives to choose between health and tobacco product. It's not a hard choice at all. Smoking companies, I've told my friends who own smoke shops in Kalihi, they can invest in another product instead of a toxic electronic smoking device, luring in students. You don't get to just get easy money from students. That is morally wrong. And that's why public policy should regulate that.
Thank you, Angela. Mahalo for your testimony and your insight. We'll now go to folks that have called in. First, phone number ending in 097. You can press *6 to unmute. Please just identify yourself and then proceed.
Hello, my name is George Johnson. I'm a member of the National Hookah Community Association, and I would like to say mahalo for taking in consideration the rich cultural practice of hookah and shisha smoking. By having traditional flavors like double apple, honey, and molasses, it does make it, by definition, a flavored product. So a flavor ban would be an outright ban of the way traditional hookah is practiced. And so that's why it is deserving of a carve-out. And I also think that if you look at the rates of hookah smoking by the youth tobacco surveys, hookah is not seen at anywhere the level that you're seeing with these vaping devices. If hookah was on that level, I would not be manufacturing hookahs. One of the great things about America and the Aloha State in general is that we're a melting pot of many cultures. And you may not agree with some parts of culture, but it is part of that culture. My great-grandfather was an indentured servant on the Dole Plantation, and the best stories I ever hear about him was when the cultures came together to share their culture and be one. So I'm all for protecting youth. I applaud public health advocacy groups for taking steps in this direction, but hookah definitely deserves a carve-out. Mahalo for your time. Thank you.
Mahalo for that. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, we'll go to phone number ending in 833. Again, you can push *6 and identify yourself, and then following number 833 will be phone number ending in 574.
Good evening. My name is Neve Donahue, and I would like to thank the City Council for recognizing the cultural heritage and practices that surround the centuries-old tradition of hookah. I would also like to mention that there are bad actors in the vape industry that are trying to market vape juice as e-hookah. This is not hookah. Hookah is an important practice that many minorities engage in, and we would all just like to give our thanks to the Council for helping to save hookah. If you have any more questions, I ask that you please reach out to the NHCA if you need further clarification on the differences between hookahs and e-hookahs. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony. Are there any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, mahalo. Will go next to phone number ending in 574. Again, you can press *6 to unmute and identify yourself.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can. Please proceed.
My name is Ra Long, owner of Arcade Groceries located in Chinatown. Thank you, council members, for giving me an opportunity to speak. I want to again start off with some data. In 2019, the state of Massachusetts became the first state to ban the sale of all flavored tobacco and nicotine products, including flavored electronic cigarettes and menthol cigarettes. Fast forward to recent years, and here is what the state is dealing with now. The ban created a booming illicit market. Both organized criminal and petty smugglers are reaping millions from the newly created illicit market, while the state is being forced to spend more and more on enforcement and prosecution. One fiscal year after the ban, the state brought in 27% less tax revenue from all tobacco-related products, nearly 30% less cigarette tax revenue, and 47% less revenue from smokeless tobacco. The illicit market has put a strain on law enforcement and state investigators. The state has seized so much in illicit products, forcing the state to lease additional space just to store the products. If you are wondering why I'm giving you data on another state, it's because Massachusetts is a 33% menthol state, meaning all tobacco users, 30% of them smoke menthol. Hawaii is a 65% menthol state. You can imagine what the illicit market will do to this state. This is a lot to put a state through when the CDC has youth smoking rate at 3.5%. I reiterate, you must be 21 to buy any tobacco-related products, so you can't come in a store if you are a student and you are under 21 to buy a tobacco product. In the black market, age wouldn't matter. What matters is untaxed cash transactions. If this is still a way to say to protect youth, then I ask the council to look at depression and suicide rates caused by social media or the youth death rate caused by fentanyl. There are hundreds of vape stores and convenience stores on this island. How many members of this council walk into a vape shop in your district and told there is a chance that we will be taking 100% of your family's income, or into a convenience store and tell them they'll be losing 10 to 30% of their income? I ask the council members to think of the families that put a lot of blood and sweat into their business. Vote no on this bill. Thank you again for letting me speak.
Mahalo for testifying. Are there any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you again. And that brings us to discussion. So I would love to hear anyone's thoughts, because if it does move out of committee, it'll go to full council too. So Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam.
Chair, again, you know, the reason why I introduced these exemptions was to have this conversation, and I think the purpose of bringing up cigars is as I expressed in the previous hearing, it's because inherent in the marketing of premium cigars, retailers make statements about the inherent flavors of the tobacco itself. And I guess my issue really is with the presumption of flavor language, and specifically Part B2, which is not, I think, sufficiently clear to me that somebody saying, well, this cigar, which is 100% made out of tobacco with no added essential oils, or I don't even know how they go about flavoring these things, has flavors of, I don't know, bourbon and oak and dark chocolate and blah, blah, blah. The presumption of flavor language would criminalize that, even though the product itself is 100% made out of tobacco with no other additives, as I read it now. Now, if somebody can convince me otherwise, I'm happy to take a look at that. But what concerns me is that if that's the case, that product, even though it would otherwise be legal, is subject to seizure by an inspector, which we'll talk about next. And that just concerns me, because then we end up in a situation where we as a city, whatever agency is enforcing this, runs into an issue of, is this flavored or not? Has the retailer made the statement or not? And it just seems very messy to me. And so it occurs to me that perhaps in a future iteration of this, we don't need to do an exception necessarily, but we could deal specifically with this presumption of flavor language to make it clear that for products that are just 100% made out of tobacco with no added, weird ingredients or whatever else, that sort of those marketing statements with regard to fancy cigars are okay. This is very technical, but I do want to make sure that we're getting it right. I also have two other questions. I don't quite know who has the answer to it, but this section does reference an inspector, that any product can be seized by an inspector. I don't know if we have a tobacco seizure inspector position here at the city. And so I'm not sure who would be enforcing it. Again, if anyone has an answer, happy to roll with that. And it also talks about administrative rules, and I'm not sure what agency would create rules surrounding this if and when the legislature gives the power back to us. Is this HPD? Is this the MD's office? Is it Jim Ireland? I guess there are just a lot of unanswered questions here. Again, I think we're all in accordance with the goal that we don't want kids getting hooked on tobacco products, period. And we certainly don't want them to be enticed by guava and pog and lilikoi and Capri Sun and everything else. But I think it's worth taking a little more time to make sure that we're getting this right and not making it questionable for retailers who are otherwise selling permitted products and casting a pall over them.
I appreciate that. So it sounds like you're saying that was the intent of the CD.
Yes. Okay. And I'll also note that in the second to last preamble paragraph, I guess the second to last paragraph of section 1, it does talk about flavor ingredients. So this implies that there's some sort of additive here. And so I would want to just clarify that for these 100% natural tobacco products that are sold in a number of places, that those are okay. It's just the existing language doesn't seem to make that explicitly clear.
Okay, appreciate that. Vice Chair Ki'aina, and then Councilmember Tupola after.
Thank you, Chair. You know, the explicit purpose of this underlying measure is to address concerns related to the rising use of electronic smoking devices amongst youth. All of the data used to justify the banning of flavored tobacco is based on use of tobacco by youth and young adults. I support banning nicotine products to protect public health, particularly of youth, and I believe that we can do so without outright banning products with cultural value and products that are clearly not targeted at young people. Therefore, I support exempting these products from a flavored tobacco ban as drafted in the proposed CD2, which for shisha excludes electronic devices such as an electronic hookah, electronic cigarette, or electronic tobacco products, and which for cigars require them to be handmade.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Tupola.
Thanks so much, Chair. Yeah, I also do support the recommendations from the proposed CD2. However, my main concern is that the law still states that we don't have the ability, in fact, any county ordinance passed is null and void. And, you know, in the House, they didn't have the votes to pass it, and previously in the House, we've never had the votes to pass it. And I do believe that with the direction from the state, the reason why it would be easier to do this at the state level is because they run DCCA. And part of how this would be enforced is not through criminality. And so again, back to the enforcement. So in a hypothetical world where the counties had the ability to enforce, we wouldn't go send an officer there. Typically, if a business was doing something that was not allowed by a business, they wouldn't get a business license. They would be in violation of consumer protection laws. And we need it to be part of the DCCA if we want that to be able to be enforced in a way that truly is going to make a difference. I also think that if we pass it and then hold it, who's to say what's the next thing coming? So say, for example, it doesn't get repealed next year, the year after next, the year after next. There could be new products, new things that we on the county level think, hey, we should probably introduce this to try to, you know, prohibit that or whatever it is. So I think the timing of it is not good because we don't know how things could change. And, you know, I did hear the comment of someone saying that the current educational materials don't work, but I would advocate that the education should never stop, because even when we do homeless outreach, people could say, oh, it's not working, but there's this thing called relentless engagement where you just keep trying, you keep educating, you keep putting it in front of people. And my thought is that really, if we wanted something to pass and really make a difference, we should, as a city, put up anti-vaping ads or make something where we could immediately have a difference this year in the way that we operate with the youth and with the public that ride our public transportation. I think that's within our jurisdiction. We're not overstepping the state law. We have a lot of things we want the state legislature to pass for us next year that could help the counties. So I think that as a step forward, we shouldn't pass laws that really have no teeth and we have no ability to enforce, but rather only pass laws that have that, you know, the weight of enforcement behind it, because a law without enforcement is no law at all. So again, I'm against the targeting of youth and any of the advertisements. I think there's a better way for us to enact something this year that the city could make an impact on. Thank you.
Mahalo, appreciate that. Any other thoughts or insights, Councilmember Toba? No. Okay, sensing none from our fellow council members, so I hear Councilmember Dos Santos Tam's concerns about the cigars, Vice Chair Ki'aina's concerns about the hookah specifically. Did you bring up cigars too?
I basically support the CD2.
Yeah, that's correct. I do remember that. Okay. So based on the discussions, it seems that the committee would most likely recommend that we adopt Councilmember Dos Santos Tam's CD2. I know you had some desire to do additional language, but what are your thoughts about?
Yeah, Chair, if you're willing, I think we could take another month to keep working on this. I mean, again, this is a weighty issue. and there are some unanswered questions, and I think with a little bit more discussion, we can really tailor it down, because I do want to thank Peggy and Liza and everyone else who's, heartfelt concerned about our kids and don't want to have exemptions that are going to be abused. And so I think that we can find a way to really narrowly tailor down to fix exactly the issues that Vice Chair Kiaina illustrated, and I've sort of discussed at length.
I appreciate that. I would maybe ask Chair Waters' input as well, because as a co-introducer, if it does get out of committee, there'd be additional potential amendments in an FD. And so I don't know what the preference is if we voted on this CD2 with some maybe oral amendments, or held it off for another month. What's your preference? Yeah,
I'll defer to you.
No.
Chair.
Do you have any?
I'm okay with either way, honestly. If the introducer of CD2 wants to do more amendments or clarify, that's fine as well. But again, your call.
No, I appreciate that. I would actually probably prefer that we vote on the CD2 with some oral amendments. I'll read them out and then we can discuss them. I think I don't have to motion to amend, because I'm just going to add them for discussion to the CD2. So we're looking at the CD2 as introduced by Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. We'll go to page 3, definition of hookah. We'll just be specifying, adding an additional sentence at the end that says this term does not include electronic hookah or other electronic smoking devices. On page 4, and I'm going to ask your insight, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, the oral amendment or adjustment would be making that $4 $12.
Yeah, Chair, I understand that California has a $12 standard, which, they must have some rational basis for doing that. If there's evidence to the contrary, we can discuss that later. So I'm comfortable raising that dollar amount for the purposes of getting a CD2 out.
Okay, so that'll also be changed to $12. On page 6, subsection D3, currently list shisha tobacco products as an exempted item. We'll be adding only before the word shisha to read only shisha tobacco products, and then add that are sold in tobacco retail stores as defined in and in compliance with Hawaii Revised Statutes 328-J. And so just because I know the hookah conversation came up, Vice Chair, just to kind of specify what this is doing, is I think you recognized is in the first part, just specifying that it's not applying to electronic hookah products, and then in the exemption part, specifying shisha that's sold in tobacco retail stores, so that we don't see shisha type products rising up in convenience stores and the whatnot. So it wouldn't affect folks that are currently operating as either a retailer that's selling tobacco with shisha or hookah. And then on page 8, paragraph 2, changing city clerk in the first sentence to corporation counsel, or the corporation counsel. So it would read, upon the effective date of this ordinance, the corporation counsel is hereby directed to notify the city council, and then we'll be adding in comma, city clerk, keeping that comma, and then continuing with the rest of the sentence, the mayor and the managing director. And I think that just positions them to best, identify the law and then inform folks to post as needed. So those would be oral adjustments to the posted CD2 by Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. Is there any discussion or further discussion on that? Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. I was just looking at page 3 and 4, the definition of premium cigar, and the suggested amendment of wholesale price of $4 to up to $12. Actually, it's the wholesale price, not retail price. And just a quick look at Tamura's. You're talking about an ultra premium cigar is only going to be allowed, not just a premium cigar. So I would suggest perhaps raising it from $4 to perhaps $6, but $12 really amounts to a de facto ban on cigars.
Yeah.
My thoughts.
I'm happy to entertain that. As you mentioned, it is the wholesale price. It also is specific to items that are described with the flavor type descriptions. So, but Councilor Dos Santos.
And I think with regard to the prohibition on premium cigars, I think it's very clear that things like Swisher Sweets and other of these cigarillo and little cigar type things are clearly attractive to kids. And those are the things that they can light up in a park or beach or wherever. I think in this definition, the weight of 4 pounds per 1,000 cigars hopefully cuts out those and really gets to sort of what we traditionally think of as the traditional cigar here. So, you know, between the price and I think the weight and the other criteria, I think we're able to craft something that really gets to our intent. So, you know, if it's $6, that's also fine. The goal here is to kind of carve out the things that are really attractive to kids. I don't know how many kids are walking around with a, you know, Dominican Republic cigar in their backpack and spending an hour in the bathroom smoking it and just making themselves very smelly.
I appreciate that. So we'll do 6, and then I know the council, I'm sure, will entertain any research or. Did you want to chime in on that, Vice Chair?
Well, just can you clarify the first proposal that you talked about, the first oral amendment?
Okay, we'll go to that then.
You just went real quick. I don't have any. I will defer to the two with regard to the price range.
Okay, perfect. So just to wrap up the 6, we'll do 6, and then I'm sure council will entertain any data that can come in that talks about the wholesale price. We tried to get through the dough tax, but we didn't get through in time today, so appreciate that. Regarding the First Amendment, so you're talking about on page 3, the definition of hookah.
Or was it?
Oh, let me go through mine.
Or was it shisha?
Okay, we can. So first of all, the first change we made was to the definition of hookah.
Okay.
And then that was adding an additional sentence to that definition.
Oh, similar to what you have in the shisha tobacco product?
So for that one, it was just specifying that this term does not include electronic hookah or other electronic smoking devices. Just to point people up, when we define electronic smoking devices, it includes e-hookah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sensing no further discussion, and seems that the committee would recommend that we adopt Councilmember Tyler Dos Santos Tam CD2 with the verbal amendments. Were my verbal amendments sufficiently explained? OCS approved. Any objections, reservations on that from the committee to amending Bill 46?
I still have reservations.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any other? No. Okay. So noting the reservations of Councilmember Toba. So members, the bill has been amended. Any discussion on the amended version? Any further reservations or objections to chair recommending its movement?
I guess my question is, we thank you for amending it. I think it's just a good discussion that we're having. Is there a particular reason why we can't wait another month and just deal with some of these questions, like who the inspector is and who makes rules? I just, I don't want to get out a product that kind of pun intended, that's like not quite ready for wholesale here. And if the state's going to give this power back to us, I want to make sure that we have a vehicle that is ready to be implemented and is clear and achieves all the goals that we need to. And I think we're almost there, but I'm not quite sure we're quite ready for third reading. I mean, we could have a floor draft, but discussion during a full council meeting is a little bit more difficult to have.
Yeah, I appreciate the insight. I think the goal was just understanding that, after having conversations with other counties, neighbor island counties, understanding that some are waiting or possibly mindful of what action we take, understanding that the legislative session starts in January, understanding that, bills have to be introduced by a certain time, understanding that if we postpone it till next month's committee, then it gets down to future council and then it won't come out until later in the year. I just felt that if we wanted it to serve its truest purpose, it would be to move it along in the version that we're comfortable with. I understand your concerns. I guess the reason I'm not as concerned is because I fully imagine that there's going to be or would be an additional discussion that has to happen when if the legislature takes up the question, right? And then, of course, we could always come back and amend if there are further insight we gather from potential neighbor island action or further insight we gather from discussions at the legislature. But again, I'm not set in stone on that, but that was just kind of the intent in my mind.
Okay.
So
I guess if it's the chair's idea to move it out, I would vote to move it out, but with reservations, because I think that's just to express that I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. If it does go to the floor, maybe we can do a floor draft, but we'll have to have a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that that covers all the bases.
I appreciate that. I totally appreciate that and respect the reservations. I'm comfortable with this language. Yeah.
I agree with Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. So I'll be voting no on this one until we hammer it out. Thanks.
Okay, appreciate that. So we have to do, I think, roll call because of that. So chair's going to recommend. Is there any other discussion from Vice Chair? Okay. So we got the no from Councilmember Tolba, reservations from Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. Chair's going to recommend that Bill 46, 2023, CD1, or my apologies. Chair then recommends that Bill 46, 2023, CD2, as amended as discussed, be reported out for passage on third reading. We'll do roll call. Do I do that, Madam Clerk, since it's committee? Okay, so I'll just go down. Councilmember Dos Santos Tam.
WR.
Okay, so reservations, Vice Chair Kia-Aina.
Aye.
Councilmember Tolba.
No.
Okay, and then I'll be an aye, noting the absence of excusal of Councilmember Okimoto. Perfect. Appreciate everybody's input on that. Again, members, agenda item number 5, Bill 49, 2023 has been canceled and will not be considered. Moving on to agenda item number 6, informational briefing, presentation on the Honolulu Climate Change Commission's updated climate change brief, June 2023, from Dr. Victoria Keener, Commission Vice Chair. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Mayor's Message 2004. See Ms. Keener, Dr. Keener, present. So proceed whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for having us here today, and I'm really excited to be talking to the council and giving you an overview of our updated 2023 climate change informational brief and some of the key findings from that before we go on to a presentation from Director Gonser focusing on the Oahu Climate Adaptation Plan soon being released. Oops, sorry, do I click here? There we go. So just as a little bit of background about the Honolulu Climate Change Commission, we are an advisory commission only. There are 5 members appointed with expertise in climatology, hydrology, coastal geology, sustainable architecture, and community adaptation. And we really gather the latest science and information on climate change, specifically with impacts in Hawaii with a focus on Oahu to help inform city plans. So this climate brief is an update to one that we had released in 2018 previously, but the science has advanced, and so we have updated it to be more relevant to local climate change impacts on the island. This brief is meant to be a scientific basis for city planning and decision makers, and it's a foundation for guidance. This updated version is different from the last one because it includes progress and next steps, which highlights recent and ongoing efforts to address climate change impacts. So very briefly, I know it is called a climate change brief, but it's about 40 pages, so I'm trying to summarize some of the main findings here. Here are the general sectors that we concentrated on in the brief. They include energy and greenhouse gases, atmosphere and ocean warming, precipitation and stream flow, sea level rise and coastal impacts, extreme weather, food systems, human health, disproportionately impacted communities, terrestrial and marine ecosystems, and in areas for future research. I'll only be concentrating on some of these key findings. Each section also has a section for local observations, global observations, projected impacts, and next steps. We're giving particular attention to the local and projected impacts for the island of Oahu, putting those up front in each section. For the purposes of this briefing, I'll really concentrate on Oahu-specific data and impacts where they're available and highlight those risks and adaptation responses as a segue to Director Gonser's presentation. And you're encouraged to go to our website, the Climate Commission website, and download the whole brief if you're interested for details and citations. So just as an overall message, there's been a lot of global climate reports, national climate reports coming out in the past few years, one of which is the IPCC Global Climate Change Report that really emphasized that the choices and actions that we implement in this decade will have impacts now and for thousands of years. So we really have an opportunity now, both at local, state, and regional levels, to make a difference in the lives of our communities. In terms of atmosphere and ocean warming, human activities, it's been shown principally through emissions of greenhouse gases, have unequivocally caused global warming. And without a strengthening of policies, we're showing about a global warming average of 5.8 degrees Fahrenheit projected by the year 2100, which is getting closer and closer. In Hawaii specifically, average air temperature has risen by about 2 degrees since 1950, faster at high elevations. Additionally, the number of hot days and warm nights between 2015 to 20 were double those of the long-term averages. And that chart on the bottom there shows you the observed temperature changes for each of the islands across the state. In precipitation and stream flow sector, across the globe, we've noted that human influence has likely increased the frequency of concurrent heat waves and droughts. Within Hawaii, we've seen that rainfall and stream flow have declined over the past century, and that's observations. In that map visible there, this figure shows changes in annual rainfall and percent per decade from 1920 to 2012 across the state. And so those brown areas are places where it's gotten drier, and so you can see it's mostly brown, and those that are hatched with the black hatching are statistically significant trends. So those sharpest trends are found on the western part of Hawaii Island, although there are other places across the state as well. So in terms of adaptations, since the predictive models for the future of rainfall in Hawaii don't totally agree on total rainfall or extreme rainfall in this century, a city stormwater utility could really help integrate and address these risks and uncertainties. In terms of sea level rise and coastal impacts, that's one area where we've done a lot as a state and at the city level. The City Climate Change Commission, we provided updated guidance on sea level rise in July of 2022. And of course, there's the updated State of Hawaii 2022 Sea Level Rise report as well that outlines a lot of the impacts in great detail for the state and for the city. But I will note that the frequency of high tide flooding in Honolulu since the 1960s has increased from 6 to 11 days per year. Also, record high monthly mean sea levels were measured on the Honolulu tide gauge in summer and fall of 2020 and January and February of 2021. When we look at the sector of extreme weather, we can note that human-caused climate change across the globe is already affecting weather and climate extremes in every region. Drought frequency, duration, and magnitude have increased across the state in both wet and dry seasons. We also see more frequent tropical cyclones projected to come near Hawaii due to those storm tracks shifting more northerly. In terms of adaptations, the city is developing a long-term disaster recovery plan, and we've also recommended in the Climate Commission through other guidance documents to re-examine the adequacy of city property insurance relative to climate change shocks. Currently, the city spends almost $4 million annually to purchase approximately $300 million in property insurance. As of 2020, the total value of city property was about $3.8 billion. In food systems, we've noted that globally climate change has reduced food and water security. And the majority of food in Hawaii, as we know, around 85 to 90%, is imported, leaving these food supply chains vulnerable to climate disasters. In 2014, there was a goal set of doubling Hawaii's food production by 2020, which has now been updated to by 2030. And I'll also note that as of March 2021, 48% of Hawaii's families reported experiencing food insecurity, and CCSR has hired a food security and sustainability program manager to start looking at some of that. For human health, increases in extreme heat events across the globe have resulted in human mortality and morbidity. We've also seen increases in foodborne and waterborne diseases and incidence of vector-borne diseases increasing. In 2021, the city passed the halfway point towards its goal of planting 100,000 trees to reduce urban heat, and we've seen some of those programs today. Also, the city has a FEMA grant to begin developing a network of community resilience hubs for services in case of disaster. That could be access to energy, health services, public cooling centers, more, but these are really meant to be centers that could respond to a bunch of different types of climate events. For disproportionately impacted communities, we've noted that globally, the loss of ecosystems and the services associated with those has cascading and long-term impacts on people, communities, and especially for Indigenous peoples. We note that low-income individuals tend to lack the resources needed to respond and recover from these hazard events. And in 2020, 33 of Hawaii's households were classified as ALICE households, or asset-limited, income-constrained employed. Lastly, in the terrestrial and marine ecosystem sector, climate change across the globe has caused substantial damages and increasingly irreversible losses in different types of ecosystems. Here in Hawaii, invasive species and climate change are having interactive and compounding impacts on our terrestrial and marine ecosystems. Although the management of marine and terrestrial ecosystems generally falls under state and federal jurisdictions, the challenges we're facing in Oahu's watersheds and coastal ecosystems are inexorably linked to land uses practices that are under city jurisdictions. So thank you for your attention. And again, for lots of more information and details and data, you're welcome to go download the climate brief. It's meant to be very digestible, bullet points, quick facts that you can pull at that website, and you can contact us anytime. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Dr. Keener. Are there any questions for the presenter? We do have one more presentation from CCSR. Sensing that, yeah, Vice Chair.
Just comments because I know it's running late. So I just wanted to mahalo Dr. Keener for her presentation and actually all of her good work relating to climate change here in Hawaii as well as the Pacific Islands. And I look forward to talking story more with you, Matt Gonzer, as well as your colleagues at the East-West Center with regard to invasive species management, since that's something that Chair Wire and myself are interested in. And so I noted your comment with regard to land use practices. I, of course, am looking at best management practices for certain species that I believe some agencies should develop a policy because the coconut rhinoceros beetle is here to stay. The Department of Agriculture at a Windward Town Hall acknowledged that it's no longer a strategy of eradication, but containment to the island of Oahu, which is so disappointing. Because for me, as long as we have green waste all over the island, it's all breeding grounds for the CRB. And what are we doing? You know, we don't necessarily always have to have funding, but I would think that government agencies should be more prudent in the manner of how they contemplate their COCOA with invasive species prevention and management by their practices. And some of our agencies, Department of Parks and Rec, as well as Department of Environmental Services, all can be partners in this. So anyway, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Echo those sentiments and mahalo for all the work you're doing, Chair. Did I say? Please proceed.
Thank you. Real quick, I just also want to thank you. This is really, really helpful and important. And I want to apologize that we don't have time to really go into it. But real quick question, you mentioned the 2022 State of Hawaii Sea Level Rise Vulnerability and Adaptation Report update. Where can I find that?
Yeah, you can just, if you just Google those words exactly, it'll come up on the Hawaii.gov
Okay,
website.
perfect.
That'll link right there.
And then on the next slide, more frequent tropical cyclones are projected near Hawaii due to northerly shifting storm tracks through models that are uncertain. And CCSR is developing a long-term disaster recovery plan and re-examining the adequacy of city properties insurance relative to climate change shocks. Are you saying that perhaps we're not insured enough?
So one of our commission products did look specifically at financial risk for the city, and I encourage you to look at the detailed findings of that. But rather than make specific judgments about whether the city is insured enough, we outlined exactly how much the city is insured relative to the total property value, and let you decide.
Okay, and again, that can be found at www.resilientoahu.org/climate change commission /
All of our guidance documents are located there.
Yeah, okay. And maybe we can have the doctor back to talk about some of these things in more detail, like sea level rise and what the city is doing or not doing to prepare for that. Just a thought.
That's perfect. No,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank
Going to testimony, see no one registered online or in person, no one in person, not registered. Is there anyone online wishing to testify? Ms. Young, I see your hand raised. If you want to proceed, you do have 1 minute.
Aloha, Angela Melody Young testifying. And in strong support, climate change and sea level rise is essential to supporting our world, our planet, and our city. World Wildlife Fund is an international brand where I'm a panda ambassador, and it also supports the things that we talked about today, such as projects across the world building shelters to protect desert birds. Birds suffer from heat stress, and the project creates shade structures. And in the shade structures, is a shelter for the birds. And these projects really work with some of the concepts of climate change and protecting natural resources. And it protects animals and other creatures against predators. And so the birds are safe, the animals are safe. And one of the projects is called the Nest Box Project. It mitigates and manages the extreme heat and the impact it has on eggs. In the Philippines, they created climate resilient hatcheries for turtles built into the sand, and it lifts it up because the beach temperature gets extremely hot. And
Appreciate that insight, Angela, and your advocacy. Thank you so much. Any questions for the testifier? Since none, testimony is now closed. Mahalo, Dr. Keener.
Thank you.
Yeah. Going on to, we're in discussion, members. Since no additional discussion, we're moving on to agenda item number 7, info briefing, presentation by Climate Ready Oahu, the city's efforts to develop a climate adaptation strategy for Matt Gonzer, Executive Director and Chief Resilience Officer of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Mayor's Message 203. Mr. Director Gonzer, do you want to proceed with the presentation?
Mahalo, Chair. Mahalo, Vice Chair Kia'aina, and members of the committee, and mahalo to Council Member Say and Chair Waters for joining in this discussion. Thank you for sticking it out. Obviously a long day, but these kinds of discussions are critically important, and climate is not waiting for anyone. So we greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide a status update on the city's development of a climate adaptation strategy called Climate Ready Oahu. And really this is just a preview and an effort to socialize, because we will be coming back several months from now, hopefully with introduction of resolution towards adoption of this first ever climate adaptation strategy. So very quickly, just to provide some background, share some of the process that we've gone through, share sort of the structure of how the strategy is shaping out, and then really to share what the next steps are moving forward. So really just echoing the wisdom and the courage of the voters of this island in establishing an Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, which at the same time also established the city's Climate Change Commission. And I'll jump on the bandwagon expressing mahalo to Dr. Victoria Keener, who's actually in her final year of her second term. So we greatly appreciate her continued service to the city and support for our office and the administration. But the City Council has also further defined the kinds of programs, roles, and responsibilities for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And in Ordinance 20-47, which is now Chapter 2-10, there is a specific and explicit climate change adaptation policy. So really, we're here working with all of you, with agencies, and with community to further define what that means for us in light of the climate hazards and impacts that Dr. Keener spoke about. And again, with community and with all of you, we have been really taking action and defining what climate resilience is and must be for this island. And climate adaptation strategy is really the natural next step in terms of the portfolio of work for the office and the team and for the city as a whole. You're all quite very familiar with both state and city goals around climate action, and those are the targets to reduce the carbon pollution that is causing us to think about climate change adaptation. But as a result of all of the inertia and all of the climate pollution that's already in the system, we know if we shut it off yesterday, we would still have to continue to prepare communities, just like the presentation during the Parks Committee, right, where the youth was explaining how hot it is out there today and how hot it is going to be tomorrow. So we're here to talk about that and really drive a vision for what a Climate Ready Oahu is, because we know we've already measured changes, and those are the observations that Dr. Keener shared, but we also know change is on the horizon as well. And for an island community, no action really isn't a choice when change is coming to your shoreline. So we're greatly appreciative of all the inputs that we've collected to date, and to really emphasize that this is not starting from scratch. If you look at any of the sustainable community plans, the general plan, the city's hazard mitigation plan, the forthcoming long-term disaster recovery plan, community is acutely aware of these challenges, and they've been sharing their hopes for how we can address them moving forward. So really we're here to bring validation to those voices and define it in a strategy. And just the last thing on this is that this notion of a climate adaptation strategy actually comes from the community contributions of the resilience strategy, and this is one of those actions. So this is actually also further implementing the resilience strategy. And just to echo again, the resources that are available from the city's Climate Change Commission, Chair Waters, you asked about that financial risk question. That's actually from a document that they delivered in 2020, and we can go back and share that with you. Anytime the commission does adopt a guidance document, we do formally transmit it over to council, and they've been quite prolific. It is quite a bit of information for all of us to incorporate into our work. And from the analysis within Climate Ready Oahu, there were a handful of top climate hazards and impacts that we're focusing on, and this is really a function of the likelihood and consequence. So when we're talking about climate risk, we're looking at those two factors. How likely is that change or some threshold or some event? And what is the consequence from that event? And as a result of where we really know sea level rise and temperature are going, those ranked as our top two hazards, primarily because of the certainty around the likelihood in the near, mid, and long term. That's not to say that something like a hurricane is not consequential. It obviously is, but the science is uncertain, right? Any year we're getting a forecast, but we also know the likelihood of a storm impacting the islands is increasing because the ocean around us is also warming, and that's fuel for those tropical storms. You don't see here, but obviously we want to acknowledge and share that we are acutely aware of wildfire as a risk. It doesn't define itself as a climate hazard here in this assessment, primarily because it's a result of other climate hazards like increasing temperature, drying conditions, prolonged drought, reduced precipitation, and then the cascading impacts of the spread of non-native vegetation. So even though it doesn't show up on this picture here, when we come back in several months and we go through all of the actions with you in detail, you will see that wildfire was already being considered and is part of our continued preparedness into the future. And very quickly, just sharing, because some of this work preceded certain of the council members' terms here at City Council. There's been extensive island-wide engagement, both in-person, mailed surveys, virtual surveys, direct partnerships with place-based community organizations, where we were both volunteering with their work sites, but also using it as an opportunity to get broader community participation. Mostly I'll just leave here with you that we will be going through a public draft review period. We will have a schedule of both virtual and in-person open houses as part of that draft review process. We will then be coming back to City Council with a resolution towards adoption and continued implementation, which has been underway. And quickly before moving on, just some of the guiding themes that came from the community process really recognize that climate impacts are not evenly distributed or felt around the island. Contextually around the island, you all know you represent pretty geographically and economically diverse communities, and the impacts and the solutions to those impacts need to be local, and we look forward to partnerships on that. There's so much place-based community leadership that maybe they're just not calling it climate change adaptation. Any of the efforts around place-based environmental and cultural restoration is in and of itself climate change adaptation, because it's making the people and the places healthier so that they are more robust as those changes are coming towards us. So we do want to recognize climate adaptation by any other name. There's a lot of leadership locally. And in the discussions of envisioning what a climate ready Oahu is, three main themes came up. While we know that the challenges are hard, if we only dwelled on the doom and gloom of climate, which happens, I live it day in and day out, you all engage community in these discussions as well, climate change adaptation affords us an opportunity to also improve upon conditions. And through the community envisioning process, really coming up with these three main pillars across empowered people, safeguarded and stewarded land, and safe communities with infrastructure is how we're shaping up these three main pillars within Climate Ready Oahu. And this is thinking about empowered and prepared people, safeguarded and stewarded Aina, safe and reliable infrastructure, because all of the work that we do is about the people in those places, the environment of those places, but also the infrastructure and the services that we provide as government, and making sure that we can continue to help people stay safe and facilitate thriving communities into the future. And just real quickly on the structure, you know, it lays itself out into those three main themes around people, place, and infrastructure. There are a series of strategies within each of those pillars, 12 in total, 4 across each of the pillars. And then the layer below that are the specific actions, which then also talk about specific projects and programs that the city has enacted, will enact, and are on the horizon. And just to wrap up quickly, to share with you the kinds of things that we'll be coming back with, there's a lot of work that's already underway, and climate adaptation has not been waiting for this strategy. You all, through the budget process, through the programs and policies that you support, the leadership of city agencies, everyone's been working on this. The idea is that we will now consolidate this in a deliverable, communicable vision for a climate-ready Oahu, and there's significant effort underway, but really there's a lot of work that also needs to happen. And I'm just going to share quickly, Council Member, one example from each of those pillars, and that concludes the presentation. So within this notion of empowered and prepared people, we did pilot this summer a Climate Champions program where we supported place-based organizations and partnered with them on some climate training, some data training, and some communications training. And I want to thank Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, who stopped by at the Ho'ike we had here a couple of weeks ago, and just sharing for Councilmember Kiaina your interest and awareness. We have actually applied to an EPA Environmental Justice government-to-government grant so that we can actually fund and expand this kind of partnership program. And from the Parks Committee presentation, Trees for Honolulu's Future was one of our partners on that EPA grant, and we hope to hear back in a couple of months. Within the Safeguarded and Stewarded Aina, though this looks like infrastructure, this notion of recycled water and expanding its use is really about the perpetuation of the resource so that it's available for us to drink and available for the ecosystems. And the Department of Environmental Services, a lot of the development out in the Eva Plain, in partnership also with the Board of Water Supply, they're looking at other ways and other locations that we can produce more recycled water from the wastewater stream so that we can preserve the drinking water for the drinking water needs. And we're excited to talk about more expansion of that into the future, especially in light of the variable rainfall that Dr. Keener alluded to. And then lastly, within safe and reliable infrastructure, we're excited that we had received a congressional earmark to update and inventory the city's street and park tree assets and infrastructure. And we've also applied to the Environmental Protection the U.S. Forest Service for an additional $2.6 million to actually do a tree plan, planting more trees, and then partnerships with community. And again, this really just reemphasizes what we heard from Noah earlier this afternoon in terms of the need to keep people healthy and safe into the future. So in conclusion, just again, sharing with you the next steps. We appreciate the opportunity to come and socialize and preview what's ahead. We hope, this is our tentative schedule, hope to go out with the public review draft next month, about a month and a half of engagement with community, processing any of that feedback. And we're hopeful that we can maybe get a resolution introduced at the tail end of this year, but if not, we'll come swinging for the fences at the start of the new calendar year. So with that, if there's any questions, happy to take them. And lastly, if you're interested in learning more specifically about this project, the project website is climatereadyoahu.org.
Appreciate that, Director. Before we go to discussion, I'll just ask if there's any online testimony or in-person testimony.
Chair, there are none.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll close testimony. Vice Chair, did you have questions for discussion?
Just a question. You're expecting a public draft release in October, and is that you share that with the council members as well?
So our plan for the release is to actually do a news release that will then share the schedule of the open houses, and then I'll also do a direct specific communication to each of you.
Okay, and then with the locations of the open houses for the public?
We haven't set them yet, but the intention will have the schedule. Okay, well, I hope you can do one
for the Windward side.
Yeah, we're looking maybe upper Windward though, maybe in Councilmember Wire's district though.
Oh, that's far, you know.
I know.
Come on, you guys gotta make it so more people can provide kukua. I find it's easier to get them if you provide a forum, people can come. So, okay, I got to put a push for that. But then second, I just wanted to ask, I know you're doing a disaster recovery planning process, and of course, fire is top of mind. So are you going to make sure that you work with Department of Emergency Management Services and other, I know you're working with the public, but are you also going to be making sure to work with the other agencies because, and HFD?
So we're here representing the whole of the city's effort. This isn't just CCSR's climate adaptation
yes, but I'm
strategy.
talking about
So yes,
I'm talking about the disaster preparedness plan you're working on.
correct. Yeah, all the agencies are also participant in that as well.
Okay. And for that plan, when can we expect a draft?
I can check back in with the team. That is a grant-funded project and has a closing period of performance. So there might be some overlap of this engagement and that plan in particular, but we'll try not to confuse folks.
Yes. Would that plan allow for public input after you draft the plan, after you have a draft plan?
Correct. There will be a period of public review as
I just see more of an interest on disaster preparedness right now from community feedback. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to stress, that plan is not about emergency preparedness. It is about the long tail of recovery, where we know that there might be a very significant event, more money than we've ever seen from the federal government, and how do we manage and make wise decisions around that. So just, I don't want to overstate, you were at Kailua Preparedness Fair a couple of weeks ago. This plan is not about the upfront preparedness. It's really about how do we prepare ourselves for, unfortunately, a condition that maybe we've never experienced before, where we have something like what Lahaina is now faced with.
That's correct, but that could include fire mitigation, correct?
The mitigation comes through the city's hazard mitigation plan and the additional work that Mayor has directed those lead agencies to do. But again, there's a spectrum of hazards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I really appreciate the discussion, and no, this is just the beginning. We're going to be talking about this a lot. It's 4:55. Were there any other questions? Mahalo, Director Ganser, for all the work you're doing, and also Dr. Keener again, and look forward to talking more. But mahalo.
We look forward to scheduling in the future with you as well.
Let's do it. Okay, members, we'll conclude discussion then as well, and being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Mahalo.